In today's video, we're finishing Genesis chapter 2, verse 9. In the last video, we looked at the first half of the verse where God made every tree that was beautiful in appearance and good for eating. And now we're going to see two particular trees that he makes that are of great significance. So now picking up, Kai ta zulan te zoes in meso to paradiso, kai ta zulan tu edena gnoston kalu kai paneru. Well, let's start with this first tree, and I keep saying tree because zulan is the word for tree. And this first tree is the tree, tes zoes, the tree of life. Very famous, of course. Now, where does he put this tree? It's in meso. That would be in the midst of, or in the middle of. And it's in the middle of what? It's in the middle of the paradiso. Now, we looked at paradisos. That's the noun, and it does mean garden. So we're in Eden here. And I introduced this word in the video for Genesis 2:8 because it does, in the Hebrew and here, it does mean garden, but it does have an eschatological sense that it develops from Second Temple Judaism into the time of the New Testament. And we'll come back to that idea here in just a second. But for now, it is simply just the original garden. So there's a tree of life in the midst of the garden, and then another tree, another Zulon. And this tree is to Edenai. Now, Edenai there is from oida, a fairly well-known word. It means to know. And when it's buddied up here with the to, by the way, this is a perfect active infinitive. When it's buddied up with that to, that genitive of the article, this would be a purpose use of the infinitive clause. So it's the tree to know. But what is it the tree to know of? Well, it's the tree to know gnostos, which is knowledge. So it's slightly redundant. It's not quite like that in the underlying Hebrew, but it still makes good sense in Greek. It's the tree to know knowledge, and it's the knowledge of kalu and paneru, a nice binary pair of good and evil. Now, let's zoom in on this tree of life. It appears again in Revelation 2, verse 7, also in at least one other place in Revelation. And so the very beginning, or near the beginning of the apocalypse, John says, and it's the words of Jesus, to the one who conquers, I will grant to eat of the tree of life. Notice the same basic idea, the tazulan te zoes. And here now, Jesus saying, which is in the paradisos, the paradise now of God. So you see it going once again from a garden in original Genesis to heaven, the sort of true, the final form of the garden of God, but it's now a heavenly garden. So it's really beautiful how this tree of life in original creation, which of course was no longer accessible to humanity after sin enters the picture with Adam and Eve, which of course in Genesis 3, if you arc all the way forward to the end of the Bible, now we see it reappearing, but it's now this heavenly eschatological tree of life. So again, we've seen things like this already, how Genesis is so rich in how it informs not only the protology of all things, but in this case, the eschatology. But I want to show one more here, and this is actually in Isaiah. Isaiah 65:22, and if you know Isaiah 65 and 66 are this wonderful vision of the new heavens and the new earth, and the eschatological sort of final time of renewal. And here Isaiah foresees that the days of my people, here God is saying, look, in that future day, this day of restoration and eschatological rest, these days of my people will be so long. In other words, they'll be eternal. They'll be like the days of the tree of life. Once again, we see that Zulon of Zoe here that we've seen in Genesis 2:9. Now, the reason why this is interesting is that if you look it up in the Masoretic lacks of life, although we clearly see it here in the Greek. And so if you were to search for tree of life in an English Bible, you're not going to see it in Isaiah 65. But for whatever reason, the Isaiah translator has picked up on that. Maybe they've added it as an interpretive gloss. Perhaps they are already theologizing that Genesis is arcing forward to Isaiah 65 and 66, because very famously, Isaiah 65 and 66 talks about a new heaven and a new earth, as already mentioned, and maybe they're making that connection on their own. It's possible, of course, that there's a Hebrew text that already had, chai, which would be the word for Zoe here already. Don't know, but either way, a lot of my Septuagint students really get tickled when they see this. Like, wait a second, the tree of life shows up even in Isaiah, which is pretty cool. Well, we'll look at it again in a future video because there's another place it shows up in Revelation. But this is enough for today. Thus ends Genesis 2:9.